يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program on this freezing cold Saturday morning. But of course we warned you on Wednesday, didn't we, that it's going to be an extremely cold weekend, not only in Gauteng, but throughout South Africa. And let me warn you that if you are planning on going out, then do dress up very, very warmly. Remember the layers, layer all of your clothing and you'll be really as snug as a bug. Well, we hope so anyway. I was about to say rather not go out, but that's not practical, is it? So make sure that you are very, very warmly dressed and enjoy whatever it is that you're going to be participating in today. On the show, on this freezingly cold Saturday morning, the beginning of winter, and I suppose this is also an indication of what the rest of winter is going to be like. I hope not. But anyway, on this very cold Saturday morning, welcome, a really warm welcome to you. We do hope you're going to keep us company right up until 10 o'clock and do become a part of the conversation. On the show this morning, we're going to be talking medical aids, the importance of medical aids, and of course, defrauding of medical aids and just what the implications are of fraudulent behavior with your medical aid. Then we're going to be looking at something called Biomat, and that is a pain modifier or pain reliever. It's an apparatus, but we'll talk more about it a little later on in the show, and we're going to be talking about measles. There has been an outbreak, and let's talk about how to circumvent measles in our homes, hopefully, and in our communities. This is Let's Talk, coming to you live from Sunny Hill in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum to you once again. Welcome to the show, and we're going to talk medical aid with Ismail Rasool. He's from Discovery Health. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
My pleasure entirely. Welcome to the show. And I do know that you're battling a little bit because you have a bit of flu. We do hope that you're going to bounce back real quick. We're going to talk medical aid, the importance of medical aid. But before we get there, you are the Chief Data Officer at Discovery Health. What on earth does that mean?
It means simply the person responsible for taking all the data that comes through it in Discovery, analyzing it, finding insights, and then using those insights to enhance the value for our clients and obviously the business.
Okay, and you've been in this field for a long time.
I have. I've always enjoyed data and the maths around it, the statistics around it, and the message and the story it tells in many ways.
Okay, we're here to talk medical aid and medical aid fraud, which is serious business, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes do silly little things without even realizing that they're involved in medical aid fraud. But we'll get to that in a minute or two. Let's talk about the importance of medical aid, or just exactly what is medical aid cover?
Okay. So importantly, medical aids are society funds. They are funds that are owned by the people who put money into them, namely the members of medical aids. They're non-for-profit, so they're not there to make profit, and it's very important for that. There are businesses that sit on top of medical aids that administer that fund, that ensure they pay your claims, they answer your calls, etc. And those are called medical aid administrators, okay? And within those, there are sub-entities that their role is to manage the risk and the care for those medical aid members. So medical aids, importantly, are not there for profit. And so individuals put money in, and when they need care, medical cover, the medical aid then pays for those individuals. Historically, it's been about the young subsidizing the old, okay, and I say that historically. It hasn't been that obvious in recent years because of quite a lot of anti-selection. People come onto medical aids when they're sick. They don't buy it as a precursor and build into it in many ways. So medical aids today suffer from strain of a lot of sick people wanting cover, and there's very little subsidy from the healthy people to cover those costs.
Oh, have we become a sicker society?
So at a headline level from the Discovery Medical Scheme data, the answer would be yes. And the metrics for that would be there are more chronic members, more people having oncology, HIV, more people going into hospital, etc., etc. However, within that, there are definitely people who are becoming less sick. So once you are sick and you've been diagnosed with diabetes, for example, then you have diabetes. How sick you are once you have diabetes is a lot up to you in terms of how you control. So you get people who enter, they're very sick, and they start controlling their care, and they become less sick. So on a whole, yes. At a high level, there are the communicable diseases, and then there's the lifestyle diseases. Our lifestyles aren't healthy enough to ensure that the schemes have a balance of healthy and sick in a way. So the short answer is that a headline, it looks that way, but there are many little stories within that tell you that there are lots of people who are becoming healthier and less sick. And obviously Discovery has a vitality program that incentivizes people to become healthier and to maintain that health in many ways. So it is a holistic approach that you got to take. And medical aids in the past, who were only focused on getting money in, paying claims, if the pool is empty, asking members to top up, and that's why your premiums go up more and more. That's one model. A more modern model is to get the members in the medical aid scheme to behave healthier, so that you don't have to top up at astronomical rates as what we see today. Double digits, double inflation, and so on. And when we look at those contributions that we pay, we ask ourselves why they're going up at double digits. It's not mainly because of the cost of an item, it's because of how many people are using those items. So more people are creating more demand on accessing that pool. You know, if there were 5 out of 100 going into hospital last year, this year there's 6 out of 100. You know, so that one additional person is another 1 percentage point over and above what happened last year.
I think the one thing that confuses a lot of people who wanting to choose a good medical scheme.
Yes.
I think you're fortunate if you work for a large corporate, because they do all of that work for you.
Yes.
They do all the groundwork, and they offer you a really good medical aid scheme.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, if you work for corporates, it's compulsory that you do become a member of a medical aid scheme. But if you're a lay person and you want to have medical insurance, I think the problem is choosing the right company to buy your medical aid through. How does one go about choosing the right medical cover?
So it's a very complex question, and the easy answer, and it's probably not the right answer, but the easy answer is that it depends on the individual. But it does depend on the individual. Medical aid is expensive, okay, and we talk about sustaining premiums and making it affordable, but at the end of the day it is expensive. It depends on the individual. If you're sick and you take a plan that only covers hospitalization, you will suffer massive out-of-hospital expenses, okay. If you're healthy and you take a hospital-only plan, okay, you may not need out-of-hospital cover, but there will come a day where you will, and so then you have to trade off. And then there are lots of complex rules around. You discovered yesterday that you've got cancer, but you're on a plan that doesn't have cancer benefits. You want to now buy up, and the rules of the medical aids are quite strict that you can't buy up. So you're stuck with that plan that you have. So you've got to think about the long term when you buy a medical plan, okay? And
I think the one problem as well is affordability. People want to have the best cover possible for themselves and their loved ones. You do end up...
For example, you can only get your chronic medicines in state. Okay, so suddenly you've been diagnosed with hypertension, you need your drugs, your medicine, and then you go to the chemist and, sorry, we are not part of the network for this plan. And now you've paid in your medical aid premium, you expected this to be covered, and you're stuck with these rules. So the rules are very, very important. The rules around, and the terminology called, a complex one is DSPs, designated service providers. So they say you can get all of these benefits, and then you get told you can only get them through the following 8 providers in the country, and so then you're stuck between. I've been told I've got cancer benefits, but I wasn't told that I can get it in state, or I can get it only at 3 pharmacies in my area, or I can only go to these doctors. So those rules become important. Then there are other rules around. You can get rich hospital care, but only these hospitals are covered, only these doctors are covered, and so on. And so, it becomes tricky. So you got to spend time initially. Instead of spending 30 minutes, spend a day.
To read the fine print.
Spend one more day. Because when that moment comes, when you have to interact with the system, something has happened and you need a claim to be paid, or you need to get care, and you phone in, or you SMS, or however you contact in, and then some scary stuff happens, and then you go back to your broker who says, but that's what I told you, and it's a cycle. It becomes difficult. Absolutely.
Young people, or a lot of young people, are in the pinkest of health.
Yeah.
They're involved in sport, and obviously they're young.
Yes.
So they're in good health, the majority of them.
Yeah.
And they don't believe that it's necessary, that they really feel that it's a waste of money investing in a medical aid insurance.
Yeah.
What is your best advice to them? I mean, I, got my youngsters involved and made sure that they are covered, because God forbid you don't know what tomorrow holds.
Absolutely.
But how do we change the mindset that you're growing old, things start, your body starts changing, the environment change, there's going to be impact. You may be involved in an accident.
Yes.
So life is so unpredictable, and you need to be covered for those unpredictable accidents or events in your life.
Absolutely. So emergency care is absolutely essential for young kids. When we were young, we thought nothing could touch us, okay? And then
we're invincible.
But then you hear of a friend or someone having a terrible accident, and that's all you hear. You don't hear about the stories thereafter, that they were lost on the road around which ambulance was going to take them to which hospital, okay? And that parents behind the scenes are phoning endlessly, trying to get large deposits for hospital care at a hospital nearby. And that becomes, the untold story. And so to have that amount of cover, even if it's basic medical aid cover for young people, is critical. We must never think of us as invincible. In Islam, tomorrow is not guaranteed for anyone. So you got to think of that. And once you get that as a principle, as a discipline in your life, forever and a day, when you start a family, your medical aid is already entrenched in your budget and so on. It's not about a rude awakening. I've never paid medical aid. My wife's pregnant. How are we now getting it in? And so those become easier to deal with. It's a responsible thing.
Let's just explore that a little further. Young people who are not married yet, and they decide to take out medical aid as a single person. What happens, because you indicated that you can't necessarily buy up. Once you've taken out a lower grade medical aid scheme, and you then find that you've been diagnosed with a dreaded disease, cancer, whatever have you can't buy up. You're going to have to then go to a state hospital for care. But what about a single person who buys medical aid, not married yet, isn't thinking of getting married, will only probably get married in 5 or 10 years' time. Can he then upgrade to a family scheme once he marries and starts having a family?
I think if the family joins under his policy, the answer would be no. I think that if he terminated his policy and started a new policy with the family, I think that is possible in a way. So he's got to almost cancel his single policy, start out a new policy, okay, add his dependents on, and they then can choose the plan they want to be on. Okay, there'll be some waiting periods and that type of stuff because it'll be treated as a new policy.
But if he joins the same company and they go and they look at his history?
Yeah, so
medical history with that kind
there'll
of...
still be a waiting period, a 3-month general waiting period. There will be
Okay.
that, yeah. It's there to protect the scheme, the individuals, you
course.
know. And, you know, speaking of the fraud stuff, there's a lot of people who discover yesterday they need a bypass. And today, suddenly they phone in, they want to join medical aids. And on the application form, they asked, do you suffer from anything, etc.? And the answer is no. So they lie, okay? And because they've got nothing to lose. They need a bypass, they struggle to get into the state because the waiting lists are quite long. And so the minute they phone in for authorization or try to get care, a lot of triggers, definitely at discovery, come in, and we pin or we hold that case, we investigate. And then the doctors are involved, members, families, and so on, affidavits and so on. And then we terminate that membership, and that means that member can't ever, in his capacity, join Discovery. We are in a discussion now with the Council Medical Schemes who've said to us that actually that member should be allowed to join the next day, which we've done, and we're doing it. But we're unhappy with the fact that the member tried to defraud this non-for-profit entity. And so it is tricky. We get hundreds, you know, in fact, over 2,000 if I stand corrected.
Okay, let's hold that thought. We need to take an ad break.
Okay.
I'm talking to Ismail Rasool. He is from Discovery Health. He is the Chief Data Officer at the company, and we're here to talk about the importance of having a good medical scheme or good medical cover. But after the ad break, we're going to be talking about fraudulent activities with medical aid. You know, what is it that people do, sometimes unconsciously, and not even realize that they are defrauding their medical aid schemes, and the type of trouble you can get into for those type of activities. Still to come on the show, we're going to be talking about the Biomat, which is a pain relief device, and we're also going to talk about measles, so do stay with us. Welcome back. This is Let's Talk with me, Julie Alli. It's a freezing cold Saturday morning, but we do hope that you're really snug wherever you are, keeping warm, probably enjoying a wonderful hot cup of coffee or tea this morning. We're talking medical aids and medical aid fraud with Ismail Rasool. He's the Chief Data Officer at Discovery Health, and in this part of the show, we're going to be talking about fraud, medical aid fraud, and if you are caught out, the consequences to that. Ismail, you touched a little on medical aid fraud before the ad break, and we're going to go into that in a bit of detail. But just before we go there, let's talk about how good or how well are you covered with a hospital-only medical scheme? Does that serve you well enough?
So, sitting from where I sit, working on the medical aid side, I think that you've got to be very careful and think hard around the fact that you've taken out a hospital plan. People confuse that with hospital-only plans. They can get a lot of stuff they need in the form of tests and investigations just through getting admitted into hospital. So a hospital-only plan in its main is there to cover emergencies, okay? And it's not there to cover investigations. So you go to see your doctor, your GP, and he says, I think you need a scan, okay? That is, he's made a medical decision, you need a scan, and the decision from there is that you need to go have a scan. There's a different discussion on whether you need to be admitted because you're sick, okay? And when you are in hospital, because you're sick, I'm going to do a scan. That's a different one. So doctors often struggle between the funding decision, okay, where something is covered, versus the medical decision. And I think the medical decision is clear. But saying to a doctor, I don't have out-of-hospital benefits, I only have a hospital plan, please admit me for these tests, that's not correct, because your plan that you bought is not structured for that. It's structured for the fact that you need to be in hospital because you're sick. And the hospital setting is where you need to be, as opposed to I'm not sick enough to be in hospital, but I need tests, okay? And that sort of cycle and mindset often is what drives up the demand for more medical costs, okay? And that's why premiums, for example, continuously go up. Mm-hmm. So if you buy down less cover, your premiums are lower. But if you treat it as if you have rich cover, you can obviously see what happens over time. You know, people accessing more benefits but paying less. And at the end of the year, the premiums have to meet the benefits, and the premiums go up and up and up. And people who don't use medical aids then say, but why is my premium going up? I haven't used it that much, you know. So it is a cycle. So having a hospital-only plan, you should know that you're having it for emergency care.
Emergencies only,
I think
obviously.
in the main, absolutely.
All right. So let's now talk about medical aid fraud.
Yeah.
And I understand that it seems to be on the rise. And obviously, administrators like yourselves are concerned because then the costs are going to be passed down to all of the members.
Yes.
So we all suffer.
Yeah.
What is constituted as fraud? How do you pick it up? And what are the penalties to the member?
Right. So it's important to know that at Discovery we have a holistic view on fraud, and we define it as a deceptive act, okay, with the intention to deceive and gain financial benefit, okay, or avoid financial penalties. And that's important, okay, because it leads to the previous example I spoke about. And so that in the main is how our forensics and our fraud risk team applies their minds.
And you have an entire department
We
set
have
up
about
to
70
monitor
or 80
this.
people. We have about 70 to 80 people. They're made up of statisticians, actuaries doing a lot of analytics, right up to the end of having forensics investigators, you know, ex-policemen and that type of people, who then take this journey of we think something's wrong. There's a whole bunch of nurses and doctors that audit the thought, okay, and then if something positive comes out, there's a whole forensics team that do the actual investigation on what we thought initially happened. So it is a massively data-driven engine, okay? It works as we're speaking now. There's an algorithm that we have back at Discovery that's trolling through claims to pick up anomalies, you know. It's very sensitive. We have today in the forensics team open on a daily basis about 2,000 to 3,000 cases that we have to work through. We close about 600 every month, okay? But as we close, we get more. And so, on the one hand, it doesn't seem that it's stopping, okay? There are cases that, you know...
Before you go into the cases, would it be correct would I be correct in assuming that a large majority of people may not even be aware that they are perhaps defrauding the medical aid? They may just think that this is really a very simple, straightforward transaction with their chemist or their doctor or their healthcare provider, not realizing that it's some form of a fraudulent activity.
I think that's half right. I think more people, a lot of them are definitely not aware, but a lot of the fraud that happens is deliberate between the member and the doctor. There's a lot of that. The unintentional, I'm not aware of it in terms of like, you're standing in front of your chemist, you have a copay, and he says, you know, can I put this other item through to cover the copay? That I think there are some members who might not understand that has happened, you know, and sometimes that discussion doesn't even happen, and some of that just happens, you know, and the member walks out with no copay. So there's definitely that. There's definitely
so there's fraud on both ends of the spectrum, on the part of the member and the part of the healthcare provider.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of providers out there are under enormous pressure from members to commit fraud. You know, we take it for granted. You phone your doctor that you've seen for 20 years, he's a family doctor. You say to him, Doc, my neighbor doesn't have medical aid. She's old. Can you please see her on my medical aid? He knows you, okay? And in the main, no problem, send her through. But it's on your medical aid. Now, yes, there's a dynamic of the doctors trying to help the neighbor, trying to do you a favor, okay? In that case, the doctor should treat it for free. Okay, but the fact that you said, do it on my medical aid, it's okay, and you've given him sort of the door in a way that if he wanted to submit a claim for her on your name, it was okay for you. You have me. And so that happens quite freely, okay? And you can think of how easy that scenario is. Some of us may not be comfortable crossing that line with our doctor because we respect him so much, but some of us might reach out to him and say, my neighbor is not well, can you help? Okay, that's a different discussion, and he might say, I can I put it on your medical aid? So then he prompts that. So those become tricky moral sort of dilemmas you've got to deal with. But there's a lot of that goes on, okay?
What's the other more common fraudulent payments or claims that come through?
So the big ones are where a doctor says to a member openly, I see you've got so much of benefits, okay, 10,000 Rand worth of consultation benefits. If you want, I could submit claims on your behalf and I'll give you 5,000 Rand.
Sure.
Okay, so then you actually get what we call ATMing, where the doctors actually give cash, members going every month to collect
So they're splitting the takings.
They split it, yeah. And the way the benefits, the regulatory benefits in South Africa work is there are quite a lot of rich medical aid insurance benefits. In other words, benefits that are not out of your savings, okay, if you have savings. And so the scheme pays a lot of that. And if the doctor sends a claim and the member doesn't object, in the main, the medical system, the medical aid system trusts that transaction. You with me? But we pick up an enormous amount of ATMing.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Let's take a call. Let's take a call.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum to our caller. Welcome to the show. Caller, are you there? Hello? We seem to be having a problem. Let's try one more time. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I just want to find out from the doctor there.
Welcome to the show.
Gee.
Are we getting...
I'm a pensioner reaching 72 now, my age, and I'm a sugar diabetic. If I want to take out one plan out, what do I do?
All right, great. Will you please listen on the TV?
Okay.
Shukran for that.
Right.
I think she's raised a very important question, which we were going to get to.
Yes.
It's about older people wanting to take out medical aid. What's
Yeah.
the cost to them and to the scheme?
So the regulatory rules in the country is that old people and young people pay the same premium. Okay, there's no difference, and you pay differences in premium based on
Even
your
if you're
family
72
size.
or 82 years old.
If you're a single 72-year-old with diabetes, as she's saying, versus a 21-year-old healthy, you join the same plan, you join as a single person, so S, and that you get the same premium. So in South Africa, we have what we call community rating, okay, and that changed between 1999 and 2000, and so there's no differential premium between sick and young, okay.
And you don't discriminate against people who are upfront and say, I'm 72 years old, I've got diabetes, I've got cancer, I've got whatever the conditions are, and I want to join the scheme. Do you take them on knowing just how sick they are?
Yeah, so we have to, by law, take them on, but we have a couple of levers to protect the scheme that I'm talking of, right? And the one is that this individual in this example would join, they choose the plan they want, and then they get put on a 12-month waiting period. In other words, they pay premiums for 12 months, but they don't access care specific to this condition that they've said. If they have a flu...
They might die in the 12 months.
And that's the nature of the
Yes.
anti-selection. And,
Right.
joining at this late age, your initials, like, a sick person is going to probably claim thousands of rands, and the premium could be a fraction of that. Where does that difference come from?
Right.
And that difference comes from
The other members.
Other members, and we get a lot of members in old age wanting to join, okay? And they struggle with this concept of paying premiums but not getting anything out of it. But the right thing to do is to do it, okay? And once you're through the 12 months, you're free. You don't have anyone hovering over you, watching everything you do. If you lie on the application form, that path is a very dangerous and dark path.
And that's fraud.
That
Okay,
is
we've only
fraud.
got 2 minutes to wrap up time.
Yeah.
Very quickly, do you want to touch on a few other things that would be deemed as being fraudulent and the consequences to the person who's obviously been involved in the fraud?
So I think it's important that people know that medical aids out there are watching every little transaction today. They're doing it because technology has enabled them to more or less tag and create these networks of how people interact with medical aid. So there's a greater policing of it. There's a greater partnership with doctors to weed it out, okay? And so my advice is that, it's wrong, okay? You've got to make peace with that it's wrong. And the nature of the further elements of fraud that's coming through, medical aids are more up to speed with it. It's costing the schemes millions of rands. Discovery has recovered over 4 billion in 48 months. Okay, it's a massive amount of fraud out there. It's not small. And, you know, there are cases of 10, 12 million rand settlements with some providers. And it's big. And members then get police cases. They go down a very, very worrying path. So my advice is that, you know, what is wrong, and it's costing. If I said to you, on your plan, you're probably paying over 8 years or so, probably, you know, 8, 10, 12% more because of fraud. As an honest member, that won't sit well with you. And it's growing. And, you know, we've got to make sure that for society, we have to control these costs.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for all of that very, very valuable information.
Okay.
That was Ismail Rasool. He's the Chief Data Officer at Discovery Health, talking to us about medical aids, the importance of being a medical aid member, and medical aid fraud. Do hope you've enjoyed that. Still to come, we're going to talk measles, and we're going to be talking about a pain relief mechanism or contraption, and it's called, I think, the biomat. So do stay with us. And on this very freezing Saturday morning, we're going to now talk about measles. I do hope that you are really nice and warm and snug wherever you are. And I know I'm going on and on and on about how freezingly cold it is, but it is cold. So please do make sure that the little ones especially are dressed up warmly if you are thinking of going out. Now, the very worrying news is that there's been a measles outbreak, I think in Limpopo province. I stand corrected, but there's been an outbreak of measles, and that of course is very worrying, again especially for our little ones who are at schools, nursery schools and so forth, and they could be coming home and infecting everybody else. So let's understand what is measles, why we've had this outbreak, and what is it that we can do to protect ourselves and our families. To talk to us about it, we have a medical director of Netcare, and she is Dr. Anchan Loubser. Morning, welcome to the show.
Morning, thank you very much.
Now, what on earth does the medical director at Netcare do?
So Netcare is a South African-based company. We also have hospitals in the UK and in Lesotho. So we manage hospitals, primary care clinics, GP practices, as well as oncology and renal care and emergency services. So it's quite a wide range of services. And I look after clinical matters in Netcare. I look after clinician relationships and clinical governance and quality control, everything to do with all the clinical aspects of healthcare that we do.
All right, fine. And you have to have your medical background, of course, to oversee this in a medical environment.
Yes, I'm a medical doctor, and before I did this, I was an emergency physician working specifically in the pre-hospital space. So I'm very passionate about pre-hospital emergency care and about disaster management and coordination. And if we talk about something like an outbreak of an infectious disease, in actual fact, it becomes a little bit like disaster management, and the same principles apply. So that's my background.
Are we in a disaster area as far as the outbreak of measles is concerned? Should we be worried?
So at the beginning of the year, in January and February, there was an outbreak in the Western Cape. It was around Stellenbosch, and the local Department of Health had to intervene with an emergency vaccination campaign and control in the Western Cape. Then in March and April, that it could have spread, or it could be another small outbreak in the Gauteng province. So it is quite close to home for us being in Johannesburg, but we haven't seen a full-scale mass outbreak because of the good interventions from the Department of Health in terms of public awareness, further vaccination, and also making clinicians aware to detect and contain measles cases when they see them. So yes, we do have an outbreak at the moment, but because of great interventions by the Department of Health and the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, we've seen a containing of the spread to fewer cases. The last measles outbreak we had was much bigger than the one we've got now.
How do we classify an outbreak? Do the GPs report it? I'm just trying to understand, how do we classify that we have an outbreak of a certain disease? Of course, I understand panic seems to have set in. There's also talk about not enough vaccines available to possibly contain the outbreak.
So because measles is identified as a disease that we want to eradicate the spread of in South Africa. So elimination is the goal of measles by 2020. in a single confirmed case of measles is a possible beginning of an outbreak. So a laboratory confirmed case. So you get suspected cases of measles when you have the symptoms. I'll talk a bit more about that. And then you confirm it by laboratory confirmation, by a blood test. And a single confirmed case is then potentially the beginning of an outbreak. So if we saw 17 cases in Gauteng recently over the last month and a half, that would constitute an outbreak of measles, especially when they are epidemiologically linked to each other. So when we can trace the spread of the measles back to a single individual or a group of individuals.
What is measles, and why should we be so concerned about this outbreak?
So measles is a very commonly known childhood illness. It can also occur in adults, however. So people younger than 5 years and older than 20 years, or immunocompromised persons, so people with cancer, for example, or any chronic illness, are specifically prone to developing life-threatening complications. So measles, as we generally know it, constitutes a rash that you've got generally over your whole body. You might have some eye sensitivity and a fever with it, and that's basically the common disease. We get common complications, mostly diarrhea and pneumonia, which already complicates a normal case of measles. So about 1 in 10 cases of measles will develop significant diarrhea. About 1 in 10 cases will develop significant pneumonia. Now those are common complications. If we move on to more severe complications, then about the World Health Organization and the Center of Disease Control in the United States say that 1 in 4 cases of measles get hospitalized. So the severe complications is that the ear infections that can be caused by measles, which is also a common complication, can lead to deafness. And the most severe complication is an encephalitis, which is a condition that affects the brain. So basically, the virus then goes and affects the brain, causes swelling of the brain and dysfunction of the brain with possible lifelong neurological impairment, and that's the encephalitis as the most severe complication. So pneumonia and encephalitis, these are the causes of death in measles, and that's why it's such a simple, perceived simple childhood disease. But if we talk about the complications of measles, then those are quite severe.
Is it more worrying as a medical person to see an outbreak at this time of year, because it's the start of winter, and obviously people do then present, apart from the measles, are already presenting with bronchitis and pneumonias?
Yes, so I think from two perspectives. The first is that, as I said, any form of immunocompromisation can lead to measles becoming more severe than in a normal immunocompetent person. So if you are sick, even if it's an acute illness and you would contract measles on top of that, there's a risk for you to get it in a more severe form than were you a normal healthy person. So in the winter months, all of us are more prone to all sorts of diseases. So I think from that perspective, yes. Second perspective would be that the initial presentation of measles is a little bit like an upper respiratory tract infection, and one gets a runny nose and you feel a bit feverish, and as the symptoms onset, you already become contagious. So in this winter month period where we all think someone next to you has just got a common cold or has got flu, that person could actually have measles, and if you don't adequately protect yourself, then you could contract measles as well. So I think those are the two winter months.
Why are we seeing these outbreaks? I know you suggested that it started out somewhere in the Eastern Cape. We're seeing now in Gauteng. What has been seen in Limpopo province? Was that malaria or measles? Have I got that slightly confused?
That was measles. So
was it also
that was malaria? So measles is Gauteng province, specifically the Ekurhuleni and Lenasia areas, and the Western Cape, specifically around Stellenbosch. We've seen cases of malaria in the Limpopo province and even in Gauteng, in Tshwane specifically, which was cases of travelers' malaria where the mosquitoes came into the country, and then we had quite a few cases of malaria but malaria is not a disease that spreads from person to person. It's just because there were mosquitoes, infected mosquitoes in the country. So that is, I think, what you are thinking of in the Limpopo province.
Yeah, obviously.
So what causes an outbreak of measles, what caused the outbreak vaccine in the Stellenbosch area, the NICD did a very detailed epidemiological study and traced it back to a specific boarding school. So the risk there is that it's a lot of individuals together living close by each other. Measles spreads by droplets. So it's coughing and sneezing, sharing of utensils.
Very much like flu.
Yes, exactly.
Flu and colds.
So if a lot of young people would live very closely together and operate together, then there's just a bigger chance of them spreading the disease from one person to another. And there was also a case at the university. So it's generally these institutions where people are, like schools, creches, universities, classrooms where people are close together for periods.
Let's take an ad break. We're talking to Dr. Antjin Loubser. She is talking to us this morning about the recent outbreak of measles in Gauteng. And of course, as moms of young children, I think it is a worry knowing that there is an outbreak. But as the doctor has indicated that measles can affect and impact on older people as well. So we're going to talk about what we can do about it, how can we prevent our children to be exposed, and if you do come down with measles, the children in the home or even elderly people, how we should be caring for them so that it doesn't spread further. Do stay with us. We're taking an ad break. Dr. Antjin Loubser is our guest this morning. We're talking measles, the reason why we're seeing the recent outbreak in Gauteng, what it is that you can do to protect your loved ones from this disease. And of course, as she has indicated earlier on, it can be quite devastating and possibly even cause death. So please do stay watching closely. If you have any questions or comments, you can call us on the open line. Back to you, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to sit and wonder. In fact, I asked you the question. I can't remember. I don't know whether I was vaccinated as a child or not. Should I be worried?
So to determine your vaccination status, the easiest would be to go back to your immunization chart if you do have that, and to see if you've got it. So that's the one way to get it. The other way to get it is to go do a specific blood test at a laboratory. So you can go to your general practitioner or to a clinic and ask that they test for your immunity. So they do a test that picks up the antibody that was caused by the immunization. And the third way is just to get a vaccination, to get one dose of just the measles vaccination if you're not sure and you feel that you might be exposed.
We have a call online, but let me ask you this question. Is it okay if you have been immunized a couple of years ago or even as a child to have a second shot? Would that do you any harm, any side effects?
It wouldn't do you harm. So that's exactly the campaign that the Department of Health has embarked on, specifically targeting from 6 months old to 15 years old, specifically because that's the age group where it usually starts, and because these children, as we spoke about previously, are in classrooms together, at creches together. So they do go around schools and they actually give another vaccination shot, regardless of your immunization status, to all of these children.
All right, let's take our caller. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the show. Hello there, you're on air. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Welcome.
Jazakallah for a lovely program.
Thank you.
I just have one question, if you could pose to the doctor.
Sure.
There's a WhatsApp going around regarding the measles vaccine. Apparently there's porcine in the measles vaccine that they're going to be introducing in June. So could the doctor confirm if there's such a thing as that? Gelatin I'm not sure exactly, but it's gelatin. They say that it's haram, but there is that in the measles vaccine. Could you please check with your doctor and confirm?
Certainly we will.
I'll listen on air. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you're qualified to answer that question, as you know the properties of the vaccine. But there are obviously a lot of religious groups, there are a lot of Muslim people. Obviously, if the vaccine does contain gelatin, they will not use it simply because it does contain that ingredient which we perceive as being haram, which means it is not allowed, it's not permissible for us to use. Would you know what the properties are of the vaccine?
So thank you for the question to the listener. I'm not sure actually to answer that question around the specific properties. I would actually rather want the pharmaceutical companies and the Department of Health to do that. They are better qualified around the specific ingredients. What I will, however, recommend from a Department of Health perspective is that they specifically issue something on that, and I will share it with you once received. So I think it's important for your community to understand exactly what the properties of the vaccine is so that you can make an informed choice. But talking more broadly and more specifically about the concerns around the vaccine.
And I think it's not only the Muslim community that has concerns around the properties of not only the measles vaccine in particular, but other medications as well. And then you do have other communities who would not want to go the vaccination route for a whole host of reasons. One of them being that the perception is that it causes autism in children.
Yes, so those are the big groups of or schools of thought around not vaccinating. It's the religious concern about the ingredients, and there are also other religious groups that just don't believe in vaccination because they believe in other forms of intervention when it comes to healthcare management. And then thirdly, the risk of autism. So just to go back quickly to the religious thing, I think that one has to bear in mind that it's a public health risk. You must make a decision for yourself, but you must understand that it's not just your child, it's also the community around your child that might be affected if you decide not to vaccinate. And I think that goes across all three categories. In terms of the autism risk, it's been very, very thoroughly researched by the United States specifically. The Centers for Disease Control has very extensive information on their website. If someone wants to Google it, the CDC, around this, and it's really not, it hasn't been found to be causal of autism in children. So it is a fear, and it is something that's out in the public space, but there hasn't been any specific confirmation of that cause.
However, there are other risks involved, are there not? There are other conditions, serious health risks that certain people, not everyone, I understand that perhaps 1 in a million people, or 1 in a million children, or 1 in a million vaccines do have or suffer from side effects. What would those be?
I think if we think to little babies when they get vaccinated, they always look like they get a little bit of a fever and a little bit of a systemic inflammatory reaction almost to that. So I think that would be the most common short-lived side effect of it. And then there are documented neurological side effects such as the autism that we spoke about. But once again, it hasn't been scientifically linked to the vaccination. I think, the 1 in a million figure sounds about right, and there's always complications around medication and around any medical intervention. I think what we need to look at is the World Health Organization argues that in the period of 2000 to 2015, so in that 15-year period, measles deaths of 20.3 million measles deaths have been prevented by the vaccination campaign. So there's definitely a massive health benefit and a very, very small risk. So I think the benefit outweighs the risk.
And mainly children. Those deaths that they prevented were deaths in children.
Yes, those were deaths in children, so under 5 years of age. So although you see mortalities or deaths in older categories of people over the age of 20 years, as we previously said, that's a specific big cause of death, a leading cause of death globally in children under the age of 5 years. And that's the specific target focus.
If one comes down with measles as an adult, is it worse? Are the symptoms the same, signs and symptoms the same as with a child that presents with measles? And do you treat it similarly or differently?
You treat it similarly, and it is the same. It's just that adults are at a bigger risk of developing those severe complications. So once again, the initial treatment is symptomatic. There's fever and there's an uncomfortable rash. So adequate hydration, paracetamol for fever management, and some sponging or local treatment of the rash that just treats the discomfort of the rash. Should it develop to what we said earlier, an ear infection or diarrhea, those need to be symptomatically treated as well. From a diarrhea perspective, it's important to stay adequately hydrated as well. And if you get an ear infection, diarrhea, or the more severe complications, you start coughing, for example, which could preempt a pneumonia, which is a very severe complication, then to seek urgent medical help. So there might be a requirement for hospitalization. As we previously said, it's documented that 1 in 4 cases of measles gets hospitalized for any of those severe complications. If you get hospitalized, it's important that the healthcare facility practices good infection prevention and control. So the case of measles will immediately be isolated. There might be some restrictions on people visiting you in hospitals from that perspective to protect you against them and them against you. And the Department of Health needs to be notified. So it's a notifiable disease.
So clearly taken very seriously indeed.
Yes.
If your child or your children and you have been vaccinated in the past, do you have to be worried? Can you come down with measles despite having been vaccinated 10, 20, 30 years ago?
Yes, you can still come down. You should be immune, but there are cases of measles despite immunization. So, and as you said earlier, not everyone's actually sure about their immunization, and that also said some people think that they might have had measles before, but it was never laboratory confirmed measles, so it could have been something else. So yes, there is still a risk. So specifically in the young age group, the 6 months to 15 years, at the moment it is a good idea to get another shot of the vaccine.
2 very quick questions before we wrap up. The first one being infants, kids or babies under the age of 6 months, if they are exposed, because remember we only vaccinate them from 6 months onwards. So if they're under 6 months old and if they're exposed to measles, what's that outcome going to be like, and can they be adequately treated or successfully treated?
So measles vaccine is safe from 6 months of age. So if your baby less than 6 months of age was exposed to measles, I would immediately seek help from my local emergency department or GP or clinic that I can go to. I think it's important to let schools know that older children must be vaccinated, to be aware of the signs and symptoms of measles. So the best prevention for a little baby younger than 6 years is to not be exposed. And once the exposure has happened, I would say to seek immediate medical help.
And finally, is it a factor of myth that if a pregnant lady in her first trimester is exposed to someone with measles or German measles, they could, the unborn child would probably be born with lots of complications and, have a whole host of disabilities possibly?
Yes, specifically German measles, or what we call rubella, which is also a very common childhood disease, is very dangerous in pregnancy, specifically in the first trimester, the first third of pregnancy. So it's something that should be avoided at all cost for mums, and it's also something that your obstetrician will check before you fall pregnant, is what your immunization status is, or your immunity is against German measles.
And the difference between rubella and regular measles?
So it's a different virus, and both causes a rash. Rubella is not as serious actually as the own person who's got the disease as measles in terms of these systemic complications that it can have. Measles can have long-term, immediate and long-term complications that lead to fatality, and rubella or German measles is not such a serious disease.
But the risk with German measles is if a pregnant woman is exposed to it, she'll have complications. The baby will be born with a whole host of complications.
Yes, it does lead to congenital abnormalities in the fetus.
Okay, and that's where we're going to leave it. Your take-home message to all our viewers this morning as far as the vaccine or measles is concerned?
I think to go back to your children's schools and make them aware of this great campaign that the Department of Health is facilitating at the moment in Gauteng, to be aware of the signs and symptoms of measles, and for your own children to make sure that they get an additional shot of the vaccine.
And that's where we leave it. That was Dr. Antje Loubser talking to us about the recent outbreak of measles in Gauteng. And as you've heard the issue raised by our caller, please check out with your local ulama the ulama bodies to find out if it is acceptable to vaccinate your children against, obviously against measles. So I would strongly suggest that you take the issue up with the ulama body, inshallah. Time for us to take an ad break. When we get back, we're going to be talking about the biomat and how it helps in pain management. And finally, we are now going to talk about the biomat. It's a device. I'm not sure if you refer to it as a contraption or a device, but Helen Hansen is in studio with us. She is a kinesiologist, a self-healing and wellness therapist, but she's not here to talk about all of those modalities. She's here to talk about the biomat, and she's going to tell me whether it's referred to as a contraption or a device, and it is a pain management device, and I understand that it does work absolutely wonderfully. She's going to tell us all about it on the show this morning. Morning, welcome to the show.
Good morning, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure entirely. Now, we've got something draped over the chair here in the studio, and it's called the biomat. Would you refer to it as a device or
Yes.
some form of a contraption?
Indeed, it is a healing device.
Okay.
Yes, a very powerful one at that. But it's all the way down and all the way up. So whether you are sitting or lying on this mat, you are sitting on tens of thousands of amethyst crystals.
Which I understand have very healing properties.
Indeed, yes.
Now, having said that, I'm just wondering that if I know a lot of people walk around with a lot of different types of crystals in their pockets, and they keep touching it, and they really believe in the healing properties of those. Would it not work equally well if I walked around with a handful of crystals in my pocket, amethyst crystals?
Well, you know, the way that this mat works is it takes the crystals to the next level. Because of the quantity, and because it is connected with a monitor, which is now inspiring heat, sending heat through here, and specifically far infrared light. So our bodies naturally have far infrared light, and the amethyst crystals are a wonderful conduit for far infrared light. So what happens when your body comes into contact with this mat is it's not only receiving the benefits of the crystals, but the far infrared light as well as the negative ions. And both of those we are lacking very much in the city. Our bodies have got predominantly positive ions, which is why we're so stressed and we get this pain and we have toxins that we struggle to release from. So this mat has been designed on scientists who've actually won Nobel Prize work, taking the ionization in the body to the point where the body is able to now produce and turn the positive ions into negative ions. So perhaps if you had to have thousands of crystals around you without the mat option and without the extra far infrared device penetrating through, it could work, but it would take a much, much longer time. You might need a couple of weeks or months
to get the desired
To
result.
get that effect.
Okay, let's understand who would be benefiting from this biomat. What sort of conditions or pain and in which parts of my body would I be experiencing pain to benefit from the biomat?
Lovely question. So pain in any area of the body will benefit from a biomat session. Lower levels of pain, you will feel the effect immediately. Medium to longer pain that has been a chronic pain for many months or years, because the mat works with an accumulative effect, you will need to use it regularly, and then you will really reap the rewards. And it's also a great maintenance. So if you are wanting to make sure that you don't get pain and you've just recovered from pain now and you don't want to go through that experience again, you go on the biomat once a month, twice a month to maintain the high level of cell regeneration and tissue repair in the body. Likewise, along with the pain is the immune system. So the two work very much hand in hand together. A lot of people will come and say, oh, I've got a pain in my shoulder. And then when it comes up, when we're doing a kinesiology balance there, it will show that they need to look at nutrition, and they'll say, but what has my diet got to do with the pain in the shoulder? But it's also linked with the acid in the body and the oxygenation in the cell and the detoxification of the cells. And when our bodies are able to work optimally, so that means that they are able to detox and let out whatever is not necessary and absorb the oxygen and the nutrients and the sunlight and the water to the maximum benefit, then we have a strong, healthy immune system. And then we'll be able to fight diseases and common colds and flus, etc. Because when we get sick, it's our body's way of saying to us, we're stressed out now and there's an imbalance. So the mat is great for keeping that balance, as well as maintaining long-term and also dealing with the symptoms right now.
So who should or shouldn't be using the mat? I'm thinking now cancer patients, someone who's been in an accident, they, recuperating, they're in lots of, they've had a couple of broken limbs or whatever have you, so they're busy recuperating. Would this be advisable for them? Would it not interfere with any of their treatments or anything?
So yes, another wonderful question. Let's start with the cancer. So the cancer situation has been that there have been many cancer patients in America who've gone for your traditional route and out of desperation gone along the alternative healing route, came across the biomat, and it has cured them. It has taken a period of at least 3 months from all the case studies that I've read of continuous use 2 to 3 times a week. So your chronic diseases, that's essentially what you're looking at. It doesn't interfere, however, with any other medication. In actual fact, it enhances it. So I have one particular client who has scleroderma. She's had it now for more than 10 years, which is the tightening of the skin, and the cells and the tissues are not doing the work that they should be doing. And she has tried all sorts of medication. Started the biomat with me just over 3 months ago. And just on 3 weeks ago, she started to see a turnaround. And you could literally see the skin on the surface of her body almost loosening and stretching, and her circulation had been improved, and there was just this vitality about her, and her life has started to change again because her body, her cells are able to absorb the medication that she's taking. So she didn't stop the medication, but it's now working because it can get to that point. And then moving on to your next question.
All right, let's hold that thought. Can we respond to that question after the ad break, please?
Perfect.
I'm talking to Helen Hansen. She is the importer of this device here, this healing device called the Biomat, and that's what we're talking about this morning. If you have any questions or comments around it, please do call us on the open line, but first an ad break. And we're into the final segment of the show this morning. We're talking about the healing properties of this healing device called the Biomat. And Helen Hansen is here to talk to us about it. Helen, back to you. Would you like to respond to my question before the ad break about trauma victims?
Yes,
and
that's such a valid question. Thank you for asking that, because it's very important that one lets the body do as much of its natural healing work before interfering with any device, biomat or not. And so it's been recommended in general, if one has had a severe accident, there's been broken bones, a period of about 4 to 6 weeks is actually needed for the body just to rest and do its natural repairs before going on to the biomat. Because if you remember what the biomat does, it helps to repair the cells 3 times faster than normal. And the tissue regeneration is also going to be happening 3 times faster than normal. So if you've just been through a trauma, it could be too quick and cause more pain in the body. So one does need to wait a little bit in circumstances like that before using the biomat.
How long has the biomat been on the market? And where was it actually, where did the idea come about? Where did it come from? Where does it come from?
Well, it's a very interesting story. It was around about 1980, 1981 when a couple by the name of Jean and Calvin Kim, they traveled to Korea and they were looking for new jewels for their jewelry company, and they came across a jade mine. So they were involved in purchasing this mine initially for the jewels, but what they noticed is the people in the community would actually come and sit in the mine, and when they asked them, why are you doing this? What is the purpose of this? They found out that the people were just feeling so good and so well and so healthy. And there was a medical company nearby who was taking the jade and putting it into a powdered form into a mat similar to the biomat. Now, this couple had a lot of health issues themselves, from very severe rashes to breathing, headaches, etc., etc. So they were very interested and passionate about healing. And subsequently, the company that was now involved with the jade mats, they bought that company, then went on to study further the best minerals for a healing device, and hence they came through to the amethyst. It has taken between 3 and 5 years of scientists working full-time to create this combination of amethyst, negative ions, and far infrared light therapy.
All right, now we have Nadia Rabim, my producer, that is sitting here looking like a model, sitting on the mat which has been placed on a chair here. And I'm wondering, let's assume she is now suffering from acute or mild backache. Yes. Would this be the position she should sit in? Are there any specific rules and regulations as to the way you should be using the mat? Or, do you just use it the way it suits you, or wherever or however comfortable you might be?
So yes, comfort of course is important, and then also where is the pain? So if she's got the pain in the back, this suits perfectly. There are also biomats available which are much smaller, and they would fit on a chair. This one I use in my practice on the massage bed when kinesiology clients come in. So it is a larger one. But the smaller ones you can put on your office chair, carry on with your work. It's not like you need to stop at all. And you would position yourself so that the area of the pain or discomfort is facing the mat. So let's say you had something on the front of your leg. You could lie down on that if it was a long mat, or if you had a small mat, you could also wrap it around the area.
How safe is it for children? Or is there some sort of cut-off age that you would prescribe this type of a device for?
There is no cut-off. It's safe for children, it's safe for pregnant ladies, it's safe for the elderly. If one thinks of the fact that it's safe for your chronic patients who have chronic diseases, and that it actually serves them, likewise it can do with any age. If somebody is chronically ill, or for very, very young children, or for very frail elderly people, you either start on the lowest temperature, which is 35 degrees, or perhaps no temperature at all. Even just sitting on the mat, you will get that benefit. It will take a little bit longer. Of course, the aim is to slowly increase the temperature. It goes up to 70 degrees. And the increase in temperature is what assists as well with the killing off of the deep bacteria. So it penetrates 7 centimeters deep into the body. So ideally, you would have some time on the front and some time on the back to get full benefit going right through.
What is the lifespan of the mat?
You know, it is indefinite because if you think of crystals and the amethysts, how long they survive, they actually come into maturity at 20 million years. So what you are sitting on now is really ancient jewels.
Okay, we've only got a minute left to wrap up time.
Yes.
How does this device get cleaned? And 2 questions.
Yes.
How does it get cleaned? And number 2, if you have a super healthy person who doesn't ever suffer from pain, how could this help them? Could they use it just as some sort of recreational mat to relax possibly more?
Great question. So yes, cleaning is very easy. It's a very damp cloth that you would take and just wipe ever so gently over the mat. It does come with a sheet though. So you cover it with a cotton sheet, must be cotton, so that the rays can penetrate easily through. And then just with regard to the next question, absolutely, just to enhance one's optimal thriving ability in life, yes, it's perfect for that. You know, we thrive when we have a balance of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so the mat actually raises one's vibrational frequency as well as bringing balance to all those areas. So we've had people who've used it for creative uses, who sit on the mat and who visualize and come up with new concepts for their work.
We're going to have to leave it there. How does one get hold of you to buy the mats?
Okay, so you can contact me at helen@helenhansen.co. That's my email, no.za at the end. Otherwise, people are welcome to phone me 072 409 7664 here in South Africa. And then we will import the mat for you. It's a very quick, easy process.
Okay, you can't buy them over the counter anywhere.
It's not over the counter.
All right, that's where we leave it. That is Helen Hansen talking to us about this wonderful, or so I hear, healing device called the Biomat. She's given you all the details, and we do hope that if you decide to invest in one of these, that you're going to have lots and lots of painless and pain-free time. And of course, that means it's time for us to wrap up. Let's do so with our thought of the day, which is, good things come to those who believe. Better things come to those who are patient, sabr. And the best of things come to those who don't ever give up. And on that note, as always, it is Khudafez from me, Julie Alli. And don't forget to keep warm. And also a big thank you to the production team.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا